This second section is going to look at the sound department, editorial department. Something that we'll be continuing to look at is the separation of elements when it reaches post-production. This department is primarily responsible for choosing and editing all of the different elements, including dialogue, ADR, which stands for Automated Dialogue Replacement, and we'll be digging into that process in more detail later on in the semester, sound effects, design, Foley, and background content. So they are responsible for taking the dialogue from the production and integrating it into all of these different elements, replacing lines where needed, adding value with sound effects, design choices. This department is also responsible for the cueing or spotting, prepping of ADR and Foley material. They also take all of the finished cut material and prepare it for the different stages of the mix, which is something we'll be going into in greater detail in upcoming series. This department is headed up by the supervising sound editor. They're the overseer of all these different elements. This can also be credited as the sound supervisor, and in the event of larger projects like a Transformers or a Star Wars type of movie, it's not unlikely to have supervising editors for different areas. A supervising sound editor for ADR, a supervising sound editor for Foley specifically, because the amount of content that can be generated on these projects can be quite vast, and so having a primary person who's managing all of that workflow can be quite helpful on some of those larger projects. The crew for the sound department includes sound designers. They would be taking material from libraries, from recording sessions, from Foley sessions, and creating all of those fantastical elements like dragons and ghosts and stuff. Other crew members include editors. This is usually broken down by type, so that you would have an editor who is handling the dialogue in ADR, an editor who is doing the sound effects, an editor who is doing background content, an editor who is working with Foley. In the case of very large films, it's not unlikely to have multiple editors in each of these areas to approach that content. Whereas it's also not uncommon in smaller projects for some of these areas to be very much combined, so that there are films that have been done with just one or two sound department crew. The ADR mixer and the Foley mixer are both working on recording stages to capture new content. ADR would be vocal content, Foley would be sound effect content performed in sync with the picture, typically stuff that is organic, performative in nature, like footsteps, cloth movement, hand movements, etc. And these would be performed by the Foley artists. And then the final members of the crew would be the assistant editors. The assistant editors are typically working directly with the supervising sound editor to manage all of the content of the project and help the workflows smoothly. They would work with the editors to do any setups of sessions, to finalize sessions. They prep all of the material for the final mixes, and then work with the recordists and the re-recording mixers through the mix. To finish off this section, we will look at an external video interview with sound designer Harry Cohen, who's worked on hundreds of different films, as he shares his perspective on sound editorial, sound design in particular, and a little bit about how he got into this business.
Welcome to another episode of Inside 3, where we give you the scoop on the film professionals that make movie magic a reality. This week I had a chance to stop by Sound Deluxe in Hollywood to talk to seasoned sound designer Harry Cohen. From The Mask to Django Unchained, Harry Cohen has kept us on the edge of our seat with his sonic creations. Let's go Inside 3 with Harry Cohen.
I was at a recording studio to do some piano overdubs on a recording. While I was there, I was talking to the owner and the manager, and they asked me if I was interested in helping to organize their library of sound effects, which I agreed to do because I needed more work and I was a struggling musician. Because I was conversant with synths and samplers. They asked me if I'd be interested in helping create some sound effects for some game shows that they were doing, which I did. Then the owner just turned around and said, would you be interested in trying to do sound effects on a film? That's the way I got started. First, I was doing very, very low budget features. I did The New Adventures of Mighty Mouse. I did all these animated things. I was doing commercials. I was doing stuff for Theme Park. And then we started getting overflow work from another sound company, a company called Superior Sound, doing films for Roger Corman. He made the original Little Shop of Horrors. And they were all really low budget, but they were real movies. The first movie that really gave us some visibility was The Mask. That's probably the movie that transitioned to where after that, if I said I did work on that movie, people actually knew what I was talking about. As far as speaking as a sound designer, the term has a lot of different meanings. One of them, in its most basic meaning, you're talking about the guy who is responsible for making sounds that don't exist in the real world. What does a laser sound like? What does a vampire sound like? I tend to be really sensitive to the pitch of things, doing things like tuning church bells in the background so they're consonant with the music. We take the rhythm of the train and we put it in rhythm with the soundtrack. The project we just finished was called Lone Survivor. It's a movie about a SEAL team mission in Afghanistan. It's based on a real story. There's some really long-running gun battles, and we just finished another big gun movie, which was Django. Django was paying homage to Hollywood gunshots, classic ones, and all of these great westerns. But that didn't belong in a movie about a real story about, a SEAL team. The main challenge was that there's so many gunshots and such long gun battles that we knew we would run the risk of just beating the audience up for 1,600 feet. I made ways of making almost every gunshot unique in a way, in exaggerating the perspectives. When we're looking at the bad guys shooting, the guns are right there, but then we go back to the good guys, and even though the bad guys are only 20 yards away, suddenly their gunshots are much further away and they're in the surrounds, and the soundscape is changing and evolving, and it's not just 1,600 feet of the same thing. The amount of effects that I was personally responsible for in the movie, it's a lot. All of the guns and everything to do with the gunfights and the vehicles, the helicopters, the jets, the overall composition of the scenes. I feel like I did what would have been the work of 3 people maybe 5 or 6 years ago. When I started, I could spend all day making 2 or 3 sounds. You don't have that kind of time for every sound anymore. The plugins and just the whole workstation is so much more capable than it used to be. So I can make more stuff than I used to because I have to make more stuff than I used to. With regard to what I talk to people who are looking to enter the industry, you have to be prepared to be flexible. Things are really changing in a big way because of the proliferation of stuff which is viewed on the web. There isn't less production going on than there used to. There's more. There's more places, there's more outlets. So if you're willing to be flexible, then you're more likely to find an avenue to continue to practice and excel.
If you want another scoop on Harry Cohen, then be sure to check out the additional links on this page. Thanks for watching. I'm your host, Jonah Gelzo. Keep it inside 3.